Today we're gonna see if we can revive these batteries using nothing but a welder. Hey, how's it going, do-it-yourselfers? That's right, I got these 3 completely dead batteries over here that I've already tried to recharge with my charger, without any success of course, and we're gonna see whether we can zap them with our welder and revive any of them. Alright, so a brief explanation as to why I think this charger is not doing the trick and why we're gonna try to use this welder to try to revive these batteries. Alright, so as you may know, each car battery has 6 cells. Now, you can see it clearly on this white battery here. You can see how each cell is divided. You can also see the acid that's in each cell. And you can actually see the level they're supposed to be and how low some of these cells are. And then in each cell, you have 2 separate series of lead plates. Here, if we were to remove these covers, you can kind of see them right there inside the battery. Now, to be clear again, these lead plates aren't physically touching each other. They're separated by the acid that's in each cell. Now, each cell produces 2.1 volts, and each series of plates on the negative and the positive side of each cell is connected in series to all the other cells, giving you 12.6 volts. Now, the electrolyte inside a car battery is sulfuric acid, and that's why these batteries are called lead acid batteries. Now, whenever you discharge one of these batteries, or in other words, use it to power, let's say, a light bulb or headlights on your car, you create what are called lead sulfide crystals. Now, these crystals will form on the lead plates of your battery, and therefore decreasing the contact surface of the lead plates, and by doing that, you're decreasing the capacity of the battery to start your car. Now, whenever you recharge or charge your car's battery using the alternator that's on your car, those sulfate crystals will dissipate and go away, restoring your car's battery's capacity. Now, whenever this is done correctly on your car, in other words, you have a good alternator to begin with, all the connections are fine, also you have a good battery, we're talking about very small sulfate crystals that form on the plates of your battery. In other words, they form quickly and they go away quickly as well. Now, however, when you have a charging system that's not working right, maybe there's a problem, there's corrosion on the connections, or the alternator is weak, or simply the battery is getting old due to wear and tear, that usually means larger and larger sulfate crystals are forming on the plates. They're not going away, they're not dissipating away, and therefore reducing the contact surface of the plates, and in other words, reducing the capacity of the battery to the point where you cannot start your car's engine. And that's where desulfation comes in. And that's why we're gonna give it a go with the welder today. And as far as why this charger is not doing the trick, is because these newer battery chargers are usually smart chargers, or in other words, they have a microprocessor that will prevent the battery from being overcharged. And that's because if you overcharge a battery enough, it can explode and cause bodily harm to someone. So the manufacturer doesn't want to deal with that, therefore, they limit the amount of current and voltage that can go through a battery through one of their chargers. And the thing is, when you're dealing with old, neglected batteries, you need more power than these chargers to break up those sulfate crystals that are on the lead plates. And therefore, the idea behind using a welder to do this. All right, so first thing you want to do before you hook up the battery to a welder is to do a visual inspection first. Make sure there are no physical damage to the battery. The sides aren't bulging out. Also, if you have a battery, like this old one I got laying around, where you get a negative voltage, you can see we got negative 0.69 volts. You want to throw that battery out and never hook up a welder to this type of battery, because this battery more than likely has an internal short. All right, so for a good before and after, let's get a voltage reading on these batteries before we hook them up to the welder as well. So this one, number 1, we got 4.38 volts. So here, let's write it down here. And here's battery number 2. We got 4.3 volts on this one. And here's battery number 3. We got 6.8 volts on this one. All right, next, obviously you want to clean the top of the battery and then remove the caps. There's still going to be dirt underneath these caps. Again, with the rag, clean the dirt, making sure you don't drop any inside the battery. And after we do that for the 3 batteries, we're going to add electrolyte to each cell and bring the electrolyte level to the level where it's supposed to be. Now, on this white one, as you can see, it's going to be pretty easy to bring up the electrolyte to where it's supposed to be. But this black one is not going to be as easy. As a general rule of thumb, you want to make sure all the plates are covered with the acid or the electrolyte that you have on the battery. Now, as you can see, we have enough in this battery, it seems, but we're still going to add a little bit more and bring the level up to right where the plastic housing starts. I don't know if you guys can see it on camera. That's because when we start hitting these with the welder, they're going to overheat, they're going to get really hot, the electrolyte is going to overflow, and if you don't have enough, the lead plates are going to be exposed and potentially get damaged. Also, again, these use sulfuric acid. Now, if you don't have sulfuric acid, you can use distilled water. Do not use regular tap water. Make sure you use distilled water. That's because distilled water, like the name would suggest, doesn't have any minerals in it. Whereas tap water does. And if you put those minerals inside your battery, those minerals could react with the sulfuric acid or the lead plates and damage your battery. And pretty much for the same reason, you don't use tap water inside your engine's cooling system. You don't use tap water to mix with antifreeze to put inside your cooling system, because the minerals inside the tap water will react with the internal parts of your engine, like your water pump, other metal parts, cause buildup and corrosion. And that's why I always keep a couple gallons of distilled water in the shop. So yeah, it should go without saying, if you're in doubt, just add more. Worst case, it will overflow. All right, so the next few steps are gonna be super critical, and if you don't follow them, it could be potentially dangerous or even deadly. First thing you wanna do is make sure your welder is in the off position. It goes without saying, you're gonna be using a DC setting on your welder. Again, with the welder off, you wanna go negative to negative and positive to positive. And this is super important because when you start charging these batteries with a welder, you're gonna get hydrogen gas coming out of the battery as a result. Now, hydrogen gas is highly combustible, and if you were to hook up these leads to the battery post when the welder is hot, you could get spark at these battery terminals. And if hydrogen gas is present, you could have a potentially exploding battery on your hand, or on your face, I should say. And also for the same reason, you want to keep these covers off your battery, because if you don't, the hydrogen gas can build up in concentration inside the cavity of each cell, and then if you have a spark, then that could potentially cause an explosion as well. As far as what setting you want on your welder, I've seen people go as high as 100 plus amps when they do this to their battery. I don't recommend that for reasons we'll explain later in the video. But for starting, we're gonna put it at 35 amps, and we're gonna hit each battery once with 35 amps for 5 minutes, and then wait till they cool down and do it two more times, and then get our voltage reading. So on this antique, first release to set amps, then we'll go down to 35, lock it, and then again with our leads already attached to the battery, we're gonna turn this on, and this is gonna be a bit loud. And we're gonna set the timer and do this for 5 minutes. As you can see, this thing is already overheating. I put something under the battery so that the electrolyte will overflow this way and not go and ruin our notes that we put on the battery. Now, we might not get to 5 minutes because at the rate that this one's going, we don't want those lead plates to be exposed without electrolyte on top of them. So we'll give it a little bit more. If this keeps bubbling and flowing out of the cells, we're gonna stop it and add more electrolyte. Okay, so they're starting to calm down now. It's about 30 seconds in. And you wanna do this in a well-ventilated area, by the way. I should probably open the garage door, huh? All right, about 2 minutes in, these three have settled down. These three are still going strong though. All right, so the 5 minutes are up. As you can see, these four have settled down. These two are still going. And we also didn't lose enough electrolyte to warrant stopping it and adding more electrolyte. So that's good. But next we're gonna stop our welder or turn it off. And then with the welder off, we're gonna move our leads to the next battery. Again, make sure negative to negative and positive to positive. And we got 100% duty cycle at 35 amps. So we're gonna hit this again. And here's a look at this one. This one's going pretty strong too. On this one, these three cells in the middle seem to be bubbling the hardest. All right, so it's been 5 minutes for battery number 2 as well. This one is still bubbling, but we're gonna stop our welder anyway. We're gonna stick to the plan. And we're gonna move our leads once more to the third battery. Negative to negative and positive to positive. Then we'll zap this one. And here's a look at this one. On this one, we had the best starting point at 6.8 volts. And we're not seeing as much action. Oh, there we go. Maybe we do. Yeah, those two are getting really hot. And here's a look at a minute in with this battery, and most of the action is between these two cells and mostly with this one. This one is smoking actually out of this one. There might be an internal short with that cell, so we're gonna keep our distance here. All right, we're gonna stop this test prematurely for reasons I'm about to show you. For starters, this cell wouldn't stop smoking. That's not a good sign. And also, we're getting some material from the lead plates coming out of the cell. That's also not a good sign. There's a good chance there's something physical wrong with this cell. There could be an internal short. And by doing this, we're on the risk of this thing exploding on us, and we don't want to do that if we can help it. So for the sake of this experiment, we're going to stick to these two batteries. And we're going to get our voltage reading So after the first run, so on this battery number 1, we had 4.38 volts to start off with. And now after the first run, we have, we got 8.05 volts, which is pretty good improvement after only one run. And we're gonna hook up the amp tester to these batteries after the final third run. Now on battery number 2, we had 4.3 volts to start off with. And now we have, 11.56 volts. That is pretty good. So that was pretty good. Now let's go for the second round, battery number 1 again. Same setting, 5 more minutes. Again, more bubbling action from those two cells. All right, so the 5 minutes for the second round is also up, and these two cells won't stop bubbling. We're gonna add some electrolyte after we stop this, because there's a good chance we lost too much. For now, we'll move on to the second battery, negative to negative, and of course, positive to positive. And we go again. And here's what we got to start off with. Not as drastic as battery number 1. However, these cells towards the center might get there. All right, 5 minutes are up for this battery for the second run as well. As you can see, they're still going a little bit, but they have settled down somewhat. So let's turn this off and get our voltage reading after the second round. And we got 8.16. Well, we didn't improve much there. We had 8.05 after the first round. How about this one? We're at 11.7. More or less, same thing here. We had 11.56 after the first round. That's all right, we'll stick to the plan. So here's round number 3. All right, 5 minutes are up for the third round. We're still bubbling out of those two cells. So we're gonna stop our welder and we're gonna move to battery number 2. And welder on. All right, the third and final 5 minutes are up for this number 2 battery as well. As you can see, we still have some action in the cells, but for the most part, it's a lot less than it used to be. So let's turn the welder off and get our voltage reading. First battery number 1, 8.21, 8.22 volts. It doesn't look like we're making a whole lot of progress here. Here's battery number 2. We got 11.8889 volts. That's more or less the same thing with this battery as well. All right, but now as promised, let's do a load test. So here's battery number 1 for what it's worth. That's actually, I don't know how many amps that is, but that's not bad. And here's battery number 2. We're at about 12 volts on this. Let's see how many amps. Okay, not much amps. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey man, hit it with more juice and see what happens. Now I'll do that for the sake of this video, but I think you should know a few things. And first of all, hitting these batteries with a lot of amps is not a new thing. And as you can see on this old load or battery tester that I've got here, right here in the orange, you can see charge 30 amps for 5 minutes and test again. So yeah, the procedure for hitting the batteries with more current than they're used to break up the sulfate crystals has been around for a while. Now the thing is, it's usually recommended to limit it to 30 amps or so. Because quote unquote, the lead plates that are inside your battery are very thin plates. I think in people's mind when you say lead plates, they're thinking of something at least like this, whereas the actual lead plates inside a battery are very thin walled, they're easily bendable, they're also pliable, and then when you hit them with a lot of amps using a welder or anything else, and you overheat them, they can bend and warp out of shape, cause an internal short, and damage a battery or ruin a battery pretty much. And this is actually one possibility as to what happened to this battery number 3 that we have in our experiment. Yeah, basically there are two potential outcomes. One is that you could actually improve upon the capacity of the battery. You break up more sulfate crystals, more contact surface, more capacity of the battery. The other outcome is that you could cause an internal short, physical damage to the internal parts of the battery, and ruin a battery that could have potentially been restored using other less harsh methods. Now we'll cover those methods in another video, but as far as this video is concerned, you guys are here for an explosion, I know it. So let's bump up the amperage to 75. Only thing is on this welder, I only have 20% duty cycle at 75 amps, so I'm only gonna hit the battery for 2 minutes. But still, it should work if it's gonna work. Hit it. So as you can see, we got a whole lot of bubbling and action going on at 75 amps. All right, after waiting 10 minutes, on to battery number 2. Same 75 amps, here we go. All right, now let's check for voltage after hitting these with 75 amps. So here's battery number 1. We're at 8.09 volts, which is actually a decrease from where we were at the end of the third round when we hit them with 35 amps. Now we could have had some surface charge, that's why we had a higher reading here. You want to wait a few minutes before you do your voltage check. And we pretty much have probably the same amount of voltage. In other words, we didn't make any improvement by increasing the amps. So here's battery number 2. We got 11.6162 volts. So yeah, more or less the same story here. We were at 11.8 volts. Now we're at 11.6 volts. Pretty much same thing happened here probably. Now I know what you're thinking. Hit them with more power. So here we go. That should be about 100 amps right there. So let's lock it up and hit it. Right off the bat. Oh yeah, things are happening here. You even see some smoke coming out of this one. That's not a good sign. All right, as you can see, there's a whole lot of action going on. Our 2 minutes are up, so we're gonna turn off the welder. Then we'll wait the 8 minutes and go on to battery number 2. Let's hit battery number 2 with 100 amps. There we go. Again, right off the bat, a whole lot of bubbling. All right, again, we're getting smoke coming out of the cells as well. But anyway, time is up, so we're gonna turn off our welder. And next, we're gonna remove our leads and wait a few minutes for the surface charge to go away and measure voltage. It's been about 10 minutes. Now let's check our voltage. Here's battery number 1. Again, we got 8.1 volts. So here you can see, actually from the first time we hit this battery when we had 4.38 volts with 35 amps, we got to about 8.05 volts. And ever since then, we haven't had much improvement. We went to 75 amps, it was the same. Now 100 amps, same. All right, so here's battery number 2. On this one, we get 11.7. So yeah, after 100 amps, we're at 11.7 volts on this one. Pretty much the same story. We started off with 4.3 volts. After the first hit of 35 amps with our welder, we went to 11.56. And ever since then, we haven't had much improvement. Now, just out of curiosity, let's hit battery number 1 with the load tester. Here we got about 8 volts. And here's battery number 2. Let's see what we got here. We got about 11 point something volts. And more or less the same thing. All right, now even though those 2 batteries didn't produce a winner, fear not. I have a good feeling the weak battery and this Lexus will. All right, so let's remove this from the car and zap it with a welder. Really hope this works. I got a YouTube video I need to sell. And we're gonna do this outside because I'm tired of the fumes getting in the shop. So first we'll get our voltage reading on this battery. And we get 11.97 volts. That's pretty high. So we'll write it down right here. And next we'll do a load test. And you can see clearly, well, it's actually right at the border. It's right between weak and replace. But like this loader suggests, we're gonna hit it with 30 amps for 5 minutes. Of course, don't forget to remove the caps, clean all around the cells, add electrolyte if needed, set the amps, and hit it. Interesting thing on this one, I don't see much action right off the bat, whereas the other batteries, we saw bubbling right away pretty much. What that probably means is we don't have as many sulfate crystals on the lead plates on this battery, and therefore, again, good chance that this will be a winner. All right, 5 minutes are up. Let's see what we get. As you can see clearly, no bubbling at all pretty much out of these cells. Turn this off, get our multimeter. This thing is pretty much fully restored. As far as voltage goes, 12.6 volts. And here's a load test. It's still a little weak, but we made a lot of improvement. So we'll hit it again. All right, round 2, here we go. Again, not much action going on. All right, second 5 minutes is up as well. Not a whole lot of bubbling again. So we'll turn this off, wait for it to cool down, and hit it for a 3rd time before we do the load test. All right, round 3. Here we go. All right, 3rd round is up as well. Let's turn off our welder. Same as before, not a whole lot of bubbling. But the big question is, how does the load test go? And almost there. I guess pretty much the same thing, but we're gonna just call this good. We're gonna throw it in the car, see if this will work. I really hope this works. Otherwise, we might lose subscribers due to reality. And we don't want that. Come on, baby. Look at that. Let's do that again. No hesitation whatsoever. It does work, sorta. Now the $1 million question is whether that battery could have been restored using a smart charger. Now in my opinion, it probably could have been. Maybe not to the same capacity, but it could have been restored enough to start the Lexus. Overall, in my opinion, there's gonna be a very small window or overlap where a battery cannot be restored with a smart charger, whereas it can be restored using a welder. Now what a welder is good for is to quickly restore a battery. Whereas, you put it on a smart charger, it might take a few hours. Whereas if you have a welder, you need to go somewhere, your battery is bad, you throw it on there, zap it with 30, 35 amps, you're good to go in 5 minutes usually. Now again, there are more successful methods that you can restore a battery. I've been actually experimenting with 1 or 2 methods that haven't been done before, at least not on YouTube, that if successful, I'm gonna share with you in the future. I'm especially hopeful that I can restore this number 2 battery fully. But for now, these are gonna go in storage. Yeah, until that video or the next video is up, don't forget to check out these other videos on this side of the screen. Again, my videos in the suggestion box will work as well, also down below in the description box too. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.